And I see we do have Commissioner Keen. Did you do a mic check for Commissioner Keen yet? Okay, very good. All right, it looks like we are recording and streaming, so we are now on the record, back on the record for day 3 of our evidentiary hearing in docket number 25, EKCE 207 PRE. We are continuing with the examination of witnesses. I believe we only have 2 witnesses remaining. Witnesses for NEE and CURB. Before I have NEE call its witness, let me just ask if there are any preliminary matters the parties wish to take up. Yes, Ms. Massentine?
Yes, Carly Massentine with Commission staff. We would like to make a correction to a portion of the testimony that was given on the stand yesterday. We have been made aware that the 2025 EIA Long-Term Energy Outlook was made available late last week, and we will work with the parties to file that as a supplemental exhibit.
Okay, thank you. We would appreciate that. All right, any other preliminary matters? Seeing none, NEE, you may call your witness.
NEE calls Nick Jones. Good morning, Mr. Jones. Can you please state your full name for the record?
William Dick Jones.
And what's your place of employment and your title?
My place of employment is New Energy Economics. My title is Senior Analyst of Utility Economics.
And are you the same Nick Jones that previously submitted direct testimony as modified by an errata, cross-answering testimony, and settlement testimony?
Yes.
And that was previously admitted into the record?
Yes.
If you were to give the same testimony live today, would your answers be substantially similar?
Yes.
Okay, I tender the witness for cross.
All right, Evergy, do you have cross-examination for this witness?
No questions.
K.S.A, do you have cross-examination? Okay. Staff?
We have no questions.
Okay. Well, then we're to commissioner questions. Commissioner Keen, I'll begin with you. Do you have questions for this witness?
Thank you. Good morning. No questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Keither? All right, well, I'm gonna at least give you an opportunity here. You've sat with us for a couple days, and looking at your testimony, I think it's pretty clear that some of the concerns you raised were in line with some concerns that I had when I read the party's testimony. And I've raised those concerns throughout this hearing. Can you give me, have you had any observations in sitting through the hearing of whether any of your opinions have changed, any of your concerns have been lessened, or whether you have developed any new concerns? I know that's a broad question, but I want to give you the opportunity to respond.
Thank you. I wouldn't say that my concerns have been lessened. I have heard out different parties make, compelling arguments. Where I see the position being on this docket, like after listening to those testimonies, is that there remains material risk for these projects, that the justifications for the projects don't necessarily entail a justification for the exact plan that Evergy has put forward, and that there are opportunities to minimize risks and I think benefit Kansas ratepayers through altering those plans. One example of that, as I think we heard in Vandevelde's cross-examination, Mr. Vandevelde, is that the capacity applied to under this docket for natural gas combined cycle is factually above and beyond what the company has submitted in its IRP, and that reducing that net owned capacity to a level that's more in line with the IRP would likely reduce some of the risks that we've heard concern about in this room. I think additionally, aside from reducing that risk, it would save on the order of hundreds of millions of dollars of investment that could be put towards perhaps shorter term investments or hedges or alternative options such as batteries, which we've discussed, demand side management, which has not been discussed as much, grid enhancing technologies. But they do exist alternatives that could be invested in if that investment in the combined cycle plants was reduced. And lastly, I think that that risk for ratepayers could be reduced by re-examining the second plant at a point that's more timely to that plant's groundbreaking, and taking advantage of the remaining 18 to 24 months before that plant goes under construction to reassess whether the case presented by Evergy is sufficient to justify that second investment.
Thank you. I've thought of a couple additional questions based on your answers. One of them is something I was actually thinking about last night and kicking myself for not asking all the parties about. And it's, you've raised this issue of planning for additional capacity beyond what's called for in the IRP. And it's my understanding that the IRP basically tries to target the SPP reserve margin requirement, which is sort of, I view that as a floor. That's the amount they have to carry. And the only real buffer it builds in is maybe 150 megawatts for potential economic development, which this is just me speaking. That seems like an awfully small buffer for a system the size of Evergy. What's your response to that? Do you think 150 megawatts is an appropriate buffer, or you seem disappointed that they would overshoot the capacity that's called for in the IRP? So just explore that concept of how much buffer should a utility may want to prudently plan for.
I'm not sure I have an opinion writ large on like the appropriate amount of capacity beyond reserve margins that's appropriate. I would say though that I'm not disappointed that the capacity submitted under this document is larger than what's planned for in the IRP. But I do think that those dollars could be better invested elsewhere if they are to be invested. I think we've heard concerns about affordability in this hearing. If we've also heard good arguments for why investment is sometimes necessary. But I do not see the application and the testimony of Evergy supporting the exact arrangement that they've applied for. And yes, perhaps there should be a buffer beyond SPP capacity requirements, but I believe that that could be achieved with public benefit through exploring alternatives such as battery storage.
That's a very fair answer. So I know you've heard the exchanges I've had with the witnesses, and I think I've expressed or at least probed it's in many of the same areas you have as far as maybe lower regrets solutions shorter term investments that could get us to a place of more planning certainty. Putting aside basically the one plant that is being proposed in this proceeding, let's assume, just purely for hypothetical, that were approved. There are still multiple large thermal investments planned in the coming years. Do you think the settlement terms help to influence the company to better consider the wider range of alternatives that you've discussed? I don't have the list in front of me, but there are some that I think specifically speak to some of what you have discussed, such as surplus interconnection opportunities, the opportunity to co-locate storage with different resources. Do those put us on a better footing? Are there any specific additional planning recommendations that you think the commission needs to order the company to consider beyond what's in the settlement?
Right. So I do endorse certain points in the settlement agreement. And I think, you know, I'm not going to belabor those because they're outlined in some of my testimony already submitted. Yes, I think that some of the considerations that Evergy has agreed to do better position the company to evaluate storage as an option in the future, and other potential alternatives as well. What I think is missing there is an opportunity for those potential solutions to come into play in the short to midterm. I think if I'm kind of inferring correctly from your question, yes, they might come into play when this commission meets again to consider a plant in 2031 or 2032. But in the meantime, I think that something like battery storage or one of these other solutions could probably be deployed in a shorter time frame than these natural gas plants that we're discussing. And I think that would yield savings benefits. I think it would likely yield reliability benefits. And I think it would reduce the risk that these plants entail for the ratepayer.
Well, remember, we're considering plants to come online in 29 and 30 right now. So
exactly, which is
we will very quickly be considering the investments along the following timeline.
Exactly. I think, though, that by asking these questions now and asking how these plants compare to those alternatives now, there is an opportunity to bring forward alternatives that could produce benefits prior to 2030.
Okay, finally, you touched on this a bit, but obviously the long-term gas supply, transportation capacity, availability outlook was something that I asked a lot of questions about. Many folks have found comfort. It sounds like we're going to get an updated EIA outlook that might give us some more visibility from a public source. Has your opinion of the risk associated with that item and the level of information we have on it, has your opinion changed at all? Is there anything you would like to add to the discourse that we've had so far?
My fundamental opinion has not changed. I mean, I think there are, you know, as Justin Grady spoke to yesterday, there's always evolution in the market. There's always new input to consider. I would say some of the new input that has come out just recently, including that EIA report that Mr. Grady referenced, has, I think, substantiated my general view. I believe I have somewhat of a dubious distinction of being the only person in this room to have worked as a natural gas forecaster and to have put together those 30-year reports. So I'm familiar with some of the pitfalls and some of the risks in trying to forecast natural gas that far in advance. It's never a perfect process. But if you do review that latest annual energy outlook that incorporates some of these risks, like increased development related to AI, increased load related to those data centers, increased LNG exports, you'll see that the EIA has substantially revised up their forecast for the 2030s. And it's now significantly above the mid case that Evergy has proposed in this docket. So I guess I would, I mean, as long as we're adding to the record on this point, I would also cite a recent energy survey done by the Kansas City Federal Reserve. They go out and they solicit opinions from executives at leading energy producers in the mid-continent region. So inclusive of Oklahoma, North Dakota, areas that would be expected to supply gas to these plants. And what they found is that the majority of, the average expectation of these executives is that natural gas will be close to $5 5 years from now. And I believe the maximum was closer to $8. That was the maximum expectation reported by those executives. Now, all of these are just data points. I don't think any of those are definitive, but I do see that the early signals indicate that there is upside risk in the natural gas market, and that the commission should take seriously the potential that these plants could be operating in a scenario closer to the high gas scenario that Evergy modeled, and potentially even beyond that.
Just a clarification on the, that's obviously a concerning number if gas is $5 or above moving forward. I think you said that's 5 years from now. Is, based on your knowledge of the markets, would that be an expectation that that's a go forward number, or is that sort of the immediate spike, and then as infrastructure and production respond, that would move down, or you probably don't have that level of detail?
Well, I think that, so what, in that particular survey, they're asking producers of natural gas what price they expect to see in 5 years. So it would be, in that case, potentially because they see a short-term bottleneck or something of that sort. Now, what I would point to in that same survey is they ask a separate question of what price would natural gas need to be for you to profitably expand production a substantial amount. And for that number, the average response was over $5. So if we're looking at a future where natural gas production has to grow substantially to meet increased demand from all the sources that I previously mentioned, the opinion of those executives is that they need gas to be above $5 before they commit to that.
All right, thank you. I don't believe I have anything else. Commissioner Keither? All right, any need for redirect?
Chair French,
Oh, Commissioner Keaton, go ahead.
if I may, as a follow-on to the questions that you've just had.
Yes.
Yes. Let's see if we can focus on the witness. I can see you out there in the distance. Here's my question.
Oh, there we go.
Good morning. I wanted to follow up with you on the colloquy that you just had with the chair. So, with respect to your concerns for prospective natural gas prices, my question is: are there any ways that the company can mitigate the natural gas pricing risk?
I do believe there are, and I've discussed some in my testimony. I've also, I believe I heard Mr. Grady reference one of those ways in his testimony yesterday. that there do exist long-term supply purchase agreements for natural gas. There do exist long-term financial hedges for natural gas. The issue that I see here, and I don't feel has been resolved, is that besides signing those contracts, the risk has to be mitigated through a comprehensive supply plan. And part of that is that you can't buy gas ahead of time if you haven't done the analysis to figure out how much gas you're likely to need and how much that is likely to fluctuate day to day, month to month, year to year. Because there will be fluctuations and there will inevitably be a portion of natural gas which is bought at spot prices. And Evergy has not produced an analysis in this docket showing what those kind of proportions of those components of natural gas procurement will be. So I do say that there is the potential to hedge that risk through long-term commitments. But I caveat that with the assertion that first they would have to decide how much gas they're going to commit to, which has not been done yet. And I think that if it were done, it would be helpful to really assess the economics of this plant versus alternatives and predict the impact on ratepayers.
Okay, thank you. Based upon the colloquy that you had with the chair, and that went into a number of interesting areas, I thought, as well as a response to the question I just asked. Do you want to share with us any further, in the event that we were to grant this predetermined application, are there any further conditions that you think with respect to pricing that should become a part of that grant?
Yes, unfortunately, I'm not deeply familiar with Kansas statute, so I'm not necessarily going to answer in a way that's helpful in this case. I do know that a solution that other states have used is fuel cost sharing. Sometimes that's implemented at the legislator level. Other times it's been put forward to commissions to consider that as an option if it's not expressly prohibited by statute. And fuel cost sharing, I guess, just to briefly introduce the concept, would require that Evergy wear some of the risk and that they take on, let's say, 5% of the costs, either 5% of the costs associated with fuel or 5% of the costs associated with fuel prices exceeding expectations. This is a mechanism that's already in place in Missouri and could be helpful in terms of getting a more fair assessment of risk and I guess incentivizing the reduction of risk for ratepayers. But I guess more concretely, I think that, we've talked about already the potential for long-term hedges and the potential for the analysis that would be required to prepare themselves to enter into those hedges. I think both those would reduce the risk. But finally, I think this is really what my testimony speaks to first and foremost, is that risk can be hedged by diversifying the types of dispatchable resources that are available. I'm not, going to sit here and claim that batteries are a one-to-one swap for natural gas or that they're some kind of panacea. Nor would I claim that for any of these other solutions that have come up, again, referencing demand side management, grid enhancements, improved transmission, whatever the case may be. All of these options have advantages and drawbacks. But one thing that we can say for sure is that the more diversity that there is in Evergy's expansion plans, the less that they will be exposed to any particular risk. And that includes the risk of high natural gas prices. So that would be my kind of concluding statement on hedging, is that I see the need to pursue more than just one strategy to build out dispatchable capacity.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the granularity of that response. I guess my last question to you would be this, and of course, you're not inside the company; you're outside looking in, as to be expected. But if you look at the existing Evergy generation fleet, contained within that fleet are gas plants, existing gas plants. And I guess my question to you, kind of leaning on your past experience in the natural gas area, is that isn't it quite likely that there's a degree of sophistication and learning and knowledge that they've been down the learning curve with natural gas purchasing? This is not going to be something new to them because of two new combined cycle plants. Isn't that likely to benefit them in their negotiating process for natural gas?
You know, you would hope so. But I have included in my testimony some analysis of their past purchasing. I don't think that record portrays them as being an efficient manager of risk. I think the average value of spot purchases that I analyzed, I think from 2021 to 2024, the average value was something like $5.40 per MMBTU. And one of my favorite little excerpts from the testimony provided in this docket is, I think it's in my testimony taken from an Evergy data request, which was that, you know, they are an experienced procurer of natural gas on spot markets, and they aim to, you know, use that experience in procuring spot gas when they need to for these plants. It's kind of akin to saying that you're a very experienced player of roulette. It doesn't make you better at playing roulette. It doesn't make you more likely to win. There is no, short of a financial instrument or a long-term supply plan or diversifying resources, there's no way to ensure that they will get a better deal in the future buying spot gas than they do now. And as I've shown in my testimony, they've not gotten a good deal.
All right. Well, I appreciate the detailed response and the candor of your response as well. And I appreciate your indulgence with my questions. I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Keen. Commissioner Keither, nothing else? Any redirect?
No redirect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We thank you for your testimony. You may step down.
Thank you.
Curb, you may call your witness.
At this time, Curb calls Lucy Metz to the stand. And she is virtual.
She is online, correct?
Ma'am, would you raise your right hand, please? Can you hear me?
Lucy, oh, you may not hear you without the microphone. Lucy, she wanted to raise your right hand so you can sworn in. Here.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in the cause now and hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you.
May I proceed? Oh, not yet.
Wait till the court reporter gives you the go ahead.
That's my fault. I'm waiting for the boss. Yep. Thank you. Please tell us your name for the court reporter.
My name is Lucy Metz.
And what is your occupation and business address?
I'm a senior associate at Synapse Energy Economics, and my business address is 485 Massachusetts Avenue, Suite 3 in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
And are you the same Lucy Metz that caused to be filed direct pre-filed testimony on March 14th, 2025 and settlement testimony on April 17th, 2025 on behalf of Curb in this docket?
Yes, I am.
And have you had the opportunity to review that testimony before appearing here today?
Yes, I have.
And if I were to ask you the same questions contained in those documents, would your answers be the same or substantially similar?
Yes, they would.
Okay. At this time, I would tender the witness for cross-examination and commissioner questions.
All right. Evergy, any questions for Ms. Metz?
No questions.
K.I.C., I have you on my list. Okay. Staff.
No questions.
All right. We're all the way to commissioner questions again. Commissioner Keen.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Matz.
Good morning.
Were you tuned in to the proceedings during the previous 2 days of this evidentiary hearing?
Yes, I was.
Did you happen to be dialed in during the cross-examination yesterday of staff witness Justin Grady?
It was.
All right. You may recall that during my cross-examination of Mr. Grady, it was a bit in response to other cross-examination that he had previously been subjected to. I asked him to opine about your testimony and the positions that you were taking in this docket. And in fairness to you, I want to give you an opportunity to respond. And if you will, give us the benefit of your thoughts about why it is that you believe that that this proposal should not be approved.
Thank you for that question. Yes, I did appreciate the opportunity to hear Mr. Grady's thoughts and to respond. So his central critique was that my testimony suggests that Evergy should develop a portfolio that relies more heavily on incremental resource alternatives instead of the combined cycle units. And what he said was that if Evergy had submitted those types of resources for predetermination, staff's immediate critique would have been that that doesn't match Evergy's most recent preferred portfolio from its 2024 IRP, which is what the predetermination statute, one of the criteria in the predetermination statute. And my response to that, which I also laid out in my testimony, is that market conditions have changed significantly since Evergy developed that 2024 IRP preferred portfolio. And in particular, the relative cost of different replacement resources has changed significantly. So I'm talking here about the cost of combined cycle gas units versus simple cycle gas units versus battery storage. And so it no longer makes sense under these new and current conditions we face for Evergy to forge ahead with that outdated preferred portfolio, which may no longer represent the most cost-effective and the lowest risk option for ratepayers. And in fairness to Evergy, they did complete some updated modeling for this docket with updated gas costs. And we do see in that modeling that the change in resource costs begins to affect the timing of the resource additions and increases the amount of battery builds, decreases the amount of combined cycle capacity. And we do still see in that updated modeling that the model is selecting a combined cycle unit in 2030. However, I have a number of concerns with this updated modeling, including that Evergy did not account for the future risk of operational restrictions on the combined cycle units from environmental regulations. So they didn't model, for example, the 111 rules or the 40% capacity factor limit on new combined cycle resources. And that will tend to overstate the value of combined cycle units in the model. They also didn't fully account for the risk to ratepayers from future gas price volatility, which will be significantly increased if Evergy moves ahead with these combined cycle units. And I'm concerned that Evergy didn't consider the full range of resource options that are available to it. For example, siting batteries at locations with existing interconnection rights, which I know has come up a number of times over the past couple of days, or other options such as converting more of its coal units to gas to just give it some additional time before it needs such a large resource addition like the combined cycle units. And so I believe that if Evergy had corrected these shortcomings, it's very likely that the model would no longer have selected that 2030 CC and would have gone with some of those other alternatives instead. And I really sympathize with staff's instinct in this time of uncertainty related to political headwinds and tariffs and trade wars to lock in this generation. But I just think that perspective really ignores some other categories of risk that ratepayers will be left very exposed to. And one of the best ways to protect ratepayers in this type of environment with such a large amount of uncertainty is to choose a portfolio that will be robust across that uncertainty, no matter how things turn out with the tariffs. So it's really not clear at this moment what the net effect across all the different energy supply chains will be of these tariffs threats. But if Evergy builds the combined cycle units, it will be locking ratepayers into these very large assets that will then rely on gas over their entire lifetime. And the tariffs could affect gas prices as well. Whereas with more modular and incremental resource additions, such as batteries or solar, Evergy can really adapt as it goes. And while tariffs may affect the capital costs of these resources, once they're built, they'll have no fuel costs. And so ratepayers will no longer be exposed to that uncertainty.
Commissioner Keen, you are muted.
Thank you. I'll try that again. I'll say it out loud now. I appreciate very much again, the granularity and detail of your response. I think when taken together with the pre-filed testimony that we have, I think I understand your position pretty well. I appreciate your indulgence of the question, and thank you for your answer. No further questions.
Commissioner Keither?
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I want to just talk about your comment about market conditions being unknown. And I certainly think that if we procrastinate and put off, we certainly are not going to have any clue what the market conditions are going to be 5 years down the road. I think we're all probably pretty certain more expensive. Would you care to address that?
Thank you. I think an important aspect of this decision to keep in mind is that the choice Evergy is making here isn't whether it should construct an expensive combined cycle unit today or an even more expensive one in a few years if gas costs continue to escalate. The choice they're making is whether a combined cycle unit is the best option to serve ratepayers over the next many decades of that resource's life, or whether there's a portfolio of alternatives that will be lower cost and will expose ratepayers to lower levels of risk. So while we may not know exactly how the tariffs will impact resource costs over the next few years, there will be more incremental options available to Evergy that it can add to its portfolio over time to continue to adapt to those changing conditions.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Metz.
Good morning.
Chair French here. Just following up on that last thought. I'm not sure I follow the logic of what you said about it. You know, it's not a decision of whether they build the expensive gas plan today. It's, you know, well, where I'm going with this question is, you've seen their preferred plan. It doesn't just have, you know, one interest in a full gas plant today. It's got an interest in a gas plan in 2029, 30, 31, 32. There's a whole bunch of them. Even if we agree that a lot more diversity needs to be incorporated into the portfolio, particularly solar, which we don't have much of now, particularly storage, which we have almost none now. Is there a future where no efficient gas generation is needed in their portfolio?
It's a good question. And The combined cycle units are valuable because they are so energy efficient. And that makes them more capital intensive to construct than, for example, a simple cycle CT that could be paired with low cost energy resources. And I think that if Evergy updated its modeling to account, for example, for the capacity factor restrictions in the 111 rule, we'd see that combined cycles are an inefficient way to use that capital because you're paying for a state-of-the-art piece of equipment that is designed to run as a baseload resource. But if you can't actually use that resource for baseload, then you've just paid a lot of money for some extra features you didn't really need, and Evergy could have gotten by with alternative sources of firm capacity paired with low-cost energy, and ratepayers would have been better off overall.
So your position is not that no additional thermal generation is needed. It's more making the point that perhaps CTs are a better way to go than a fleet of combined cycle plants.
Exactly. Using gas for baseload generation just won't be very resilient to future regulation, and also will leave ratepayers much more exposed to those volatile fuel prices than using thermal generators more for accredited capacity, and of course batteries as well, although as we've discussed, it's difficult to get the whole way with 4-hour batteries. So using thermal generators for that purpose rather than as baseload will be a better protection for ratepayers.
I'm trying to recall some of the details of your position, and so you should correct me if I'm wrong here, but as I understood it, you think there's a better path forward, namely to add generation primarily in the form of a large amount of solar, maybe more in line with the company's lowest cost plan, and storage. I know their lowest cost plan, I'm trying to recall right now, I think it was something over 1,000 megawatts of solar in the short term, maybe 1,500 megawatts. Did you discuss with the CURB entity, or do you have any knowledge locally here in our region of the feasibility of building that quantity of solar in the short term? And I knew you've probably heard some of the discussion of local siting difficulties and difficulty for developers to get approvals, and even if they have an interconnection agreement, actually completing projects. Do you have any opinion on whether adding those levels of solar in the short run, say 5 years or less, is actually feasible, or is your testimony more of an economic analysis?
I don't have specific local knowledge of siting solar in Kansas. I think there are a variety of measures Evergy could take if it needs a bit of additional time to add that much solar. It could look into pairing the solar with wind. It could also look into measures such as coal to gas conversions of its coal units if it needs just a bit of extra time to add that solar capacity and get it online.
Last question, and it's a similar question to what I just asked Mr. Jones. As I read the settlement, it does include some terms that appear to endorse the views of AEE and CURB as far as expanding the resources that need to be considered in future resource decisions. So putting aside the one plant that we're talking about today, do you feel that those settlement terms set us up for more success and a more robust analysis in the future? And are there additional tweaks that we would need to make sure that that is a fully robust analysis that's going to help us procure a more diverse and robust supply plan.
I do think that some of the additions in the settlement agreement around considering battery storage and looking into existing interconnection rights are valuable. It's not clear to me that those represent commitments above what Evergy really should have been doing as part of its integrated resource planning already. But certainly those are options that it should be analyzing going forward in its resource plans. I do think another valuable part of the settlement agreement is Evergy's commitments around which large load customers it will include in its resource planning model, and making sure that there are some real commitments in place from those customers to locate in Kansas before they go into the resource planning base projection. And I know there's been some ambiguity in this docket about the role of large load customers because, as Evergy has pointed out, they're not currently in the forecast except for the Panasonic facility. And yet there is this lurking sense of a large amount of these customers soon to locate in Kansas. And so perhaps that's in the back of some interveners' minds as they're thinking about whether these gas plants are needed. And I'd just like to reiterate that before Evergy goes about procuring resources from those customers, it really should be should make sure it has a commitment from them and that it's considering resource procurement from those customers, specifically at the time that the customers choose to locate in Kansas, so that Evergy and the Commission can make sure that those new customers are paying for their full incremental cost of service, and those costs aren't getting shifted to the existing ratepayers. So to the extent that represents a new commitment from Evergy in the settlement agreement, I also think that is a valuable protection for ratepayers.
All right, thank you. I appreciate your insights. I don't believe I have any additional questions. Curb, is there any need to redirect?
There's no redirect from Curb, and I just want to appreciate my gratitude to the commission and the parties for allowing Ms. Metz to appear virtually today. Thank you.
Absolutely. With that, Ms. Metz, you may virtually step down. All right. According to my script, we have reached the conclusion of all the witnesses to be examined in this hearing. Before I conclude this proceeding, I think I have a concluding matter, but let me ask if any of the parties have any final matters to address.
I was just hoping to clarify, counsel for staff indicated that the new EIA outlook would be introduced as a supplemental exhibit.
So that was actually my concluding
Great minds.
matter. As presiding officer, and I presume I speak for the other two commissioners, I believe additional information around this issue would be helpful to our analysis in this case. And so I will order that that document be filed as a late filed exhibit. I would also like to ask NEE to file, if you have the document Mr. Jones referenced from the K.S.A Fed, to file that as a late filed exhibit. But I also want to be fair that if there are additional documents, analyses, information that bear upon this issue, I want all the parties to have an opportunity to supplement the record with a late filed exhibit. I'll ask that they be filed within, what's our first brief deadline? What's today? I'm going to ask that they all be filed within 10 days of today. I would also ask that the parties discuss among yourselves if you feel that it's necessary to supplement the record with additional testimony or positions on that information. I think I'm open to that. We would want that to be very brief. We wouldn't want it to be exhaustive. We're not going to have another hearing. It would just be to add some perspective around that information. But this is very relevant information, but I want to recognize that we want the parties to have an opportunity to address it. So For now, I will just require any additional analyses relating to long-term gas supplier transportation outlook be filed within 10 days of today. I don't know what that day is. And then if the parties wish to propose any additional supplemental comments or testimony, I would ask them to do that by motion. Did that prompt any further conclusory matters from the parties?
10 days is Saturday.
Oh, okay. Well, it'll be the Monday after that.
Monday, which would be May 5th, which gives them 9 days for the brief. Or if you want.
Monday, May 5th. Is that acceptable to the parties? Mr. Zakura?
I please just have one question, and that is, when will the transcript be available?
I think that somewhat depends on your discussions with the court reporter. I believe you can request and order an expedited transcript by Tuesday. If you don't request an expedited transcript, when would we expect it? 10 business days. I think that's Tuesday or Monday, May 5th.
I'm just trying to fit it in with the schedule of brief.
I would just suggest if you want it earlier than May 5th, you speak to the court reporter. All right, any additional matters? If not, I will just remind everybody that the schedule for post-hearing briefs is an initial post-hearing brief from Evergy on May 14th. Staff and intervener briefs will be due May 28th, and then Evergy's reply brief will be due June 6th. A commission order in this docket is due by July 7th, 2025. This concludes our hearing in docket number 25 EKCE 207 PRE. If there are no further matters, we are now adjourned. Thank you.